For those of you who are joining us or joining us on demand, welcome. Today we're going to go through a topic very dear to my heart, which is getting more SQLs with Marketo forms using Chili Piper. And this is a bit of a tough conversation for a lot of people because you might be faced by the likes of Microsoft Meeting Bookers, Calendly, you name it. And God, have I gone through a few. For those of you who've ever engaged with me, you've probably seen a million different variants of tools that I've been trying to figure out the best one to use for JTF marketing internally, but also how do we explore, how do we get a best practice in place? So I'm James Fletcher. I'm the CEO and a Marketo Solutions Architect here at JTF Marketing. On the call, I've also got Arthur Castillo with me from Chili Piper.
Hey, everybody. I am, as James said, Arthur Castillo, Senior Manager of Field Marketing and Community, and I work for Chili Piper. And believe it or not, part of the reason we exist is many people actually find it very hard to purchase your product or service. And oftentimes we kind of force people down a sales process versus actually allowing them to buy how they want. And I think there's a big disconnect there. So here at Chili Piper, we try and make that easy. We try and make it easy for your best customers, your best prospects to purchase from you. And we have a suite of tools now that we're calling it an inbound conversion platform, because we're finding it, a lot of people are leaving revenue on the table. So super excited about this topic and ready to dive into this, James.
Brilliant. And so today we're going to go through a couple of areas surrounding forms in Marketo. We're going to go through some of the challenges of defining MQL, SQL. We're also going to look at some of the tactics that you can apply to your marketing stack right now and in the future, which will help you get more qualified conversations. Again, there's always a challenge here and trying to cover quite a lot in a short period of time. So we'll try to focus it in on really focusing the mind on these points of increasing the lead quality, getting people into the diaries as quick as we can, and importantly, helping those sales teams get some conversations started, ease their workload, because often lead follow-up can be a bit of a challenge for most marketing teams in terms of what happened with that lead, where did it go, what was the feedback? Again, how do we accelerate some of that as well? So for those of you who don't know JTF Marketing, we've been in the Marketo space for the last 7 years. Actually, personally, I've been around for about 14 years in the Marketo space. So there's a lot of stuff that we are often joining the dots between Marketo and other systems, right? So a lot of the customers that we work with, we're always trying to find what is the best practice tools in the market? How do we overcome those challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis, which is normally generating good quality leads and passing them through that process and getting them to convert into sales qualified conversations. Importantly, lots of that can be triggered from Marketo, and importantly, lots of it is fed into Marketo. So making sure that we do that correctly is super important. So let's dive straight in. I guess the main topic of conversation when we think about conversions on our websites, when we think about engagement, we're always using forms, right? They're a digital cornerstone. The way we interact with people on a daily basis. I think the other thing that's really fascinating for me is there's kind of a blend of people who want to gate stuff, don't want to gate stuff, and there's this great debate of how many fields and what should it look like, and it becomes this barrier to conversion, right?
Yeah, and I think from us, what we see is most high intent leads that convert to revenue do come through forms. I think it's something like 80% plus versus something like a chatbot or something. And I think we can do a lot better of that. Obviously, it's making it easy for the customer to fill out, but also making sure we are grabbing the right info to get them to the right place the first time versus maybe passing them off between departments or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think, let's face it, I mean, forms sometimes can be really ugly too. They're sometimes very hard, especially in the world of Marketo. We hear this all the time. Oh, how do we style this? How do we make it interesting or engaging? And there's tactics that we can deploy around that, right? And we'll cover some of those later on. And we were talking in the preamble, I suppose, to this conversation about how much of a nightmare forms can be. Again, how do you take maybe what is 50, 60 forms across a website, make it simplified, make it a simple journey for the person engaging with it?
Yeah, and I bet there's a bunch of marketing ops professionals on the call right now with saying that, hey, I wish I had more dynamic forms, or I could actually map out in a way that if this customer or prospect fills out the form this way and had these attributes, let's actually route them to James's team instead of Arthur's team. So hold tight. We may have some interesting stuff for you later on in this webinar.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting topic when we get into lead routing, right? I mean, one of the biggest challenges within Marketo is that process of deciding where does it go. Often we're using the Salesforce default rules or Microsoft Dynamic default rules, which aren't always the best, or loading more work into someone else to figure out, well, where do we put this? Where does this lead go? So I often talk about revenue models in Marketo, and I'm probably obsessed with this. And it feeds quite nicely into this conversation around conversion rates, because one of the biggest challenges with marketing automation, with marketing technology, is how do I understand what's working? How do I understand the flow of my database? Where is it? How can I encourage conversion through the different stages? And I started thinking about how we use forms throughout this journey. And if you think about it from a revenue model perspective, which is your customer journey, the path to success in the cheesy terms, is actually driven a lot by forms, because we use them to convert people from unknown to known people on our website, downloading assets, gating content. We can talk about soft gating and hard gating later. We then try and encourage them to give us more information using tips like progressive profiling or pre-filling or enrichment in order to get them to an MQL stage where we can say, these are the right people for us. We should be going after them. And then we throw in another form again to say, hey, do you want to hear about our services? Do you want to talk to us? So we then throw in another form, and then they get stuck in this stage between sales accepted lead or sales qualified. And we're kind of in this great vision from my childhood, I suppose, is again, they get stuck in this process of sales have now got this big bunch of leads that we're going to go and follow up with and organize and figure out whether they want to have a call. Then they've got to go and schedule the call, which takes up a hell of a lot of time.
Yeah, I think at least in B2B tech, which is where we primarily focus on in Chili Piper, I call this the silent killer for a lot of orgs. And I wish we could almost do another poll, because it'd be interesting to see what the audience take is. But I'll just pose the question, I guess, answer it myself. But James, out of all those high intent demo request leads or raising their hand to speak to sales, how many of those do you think actually get a chance to meet with sales and have a first meeting? Curious to hear your thoughts now.
On my experience across multiple companies, a tiny percent. I wouldn't even say it's 5% at a guess.
Wow. Okay. Oh, that's wherever. Okay. We gotta check out the companies that you're working with. But from where we see it, less than 40%. And if we said it another way, basically 60% of your inbound pipeline that is asking to speak to sales. I always say they probably didn't wake up and say, you know what, I want a demo of Chili Piper today. I really want to speak to sales rep. There's probably some sort of conversation that's been had. So by the time they get to your website, they're further down funnel than they've ever been. And you'd think we'd roll the red carpet and say, hey, thanks. Marketing spent thousands, maybe even millions of dollars to get people to the website to talk to sales, but still over 60% of that inbound pipeline never even makes it to a first meeting with sales. So I think there's a lot of reasons that I'm sure we're going to get into later throughout here, but ultimately, like you said, we end up with a bunch of leads in our CRM that now we have to create new graveyard campaigns to revive them and get them back into the sales pipeline. So a lot of it is around the process that we never really had in place in the first time. And now we're trying to backfill and make sure sales is staying busy. So definitely a lot of improvement that we can find in this process.
Brilliant. So, I mean, there's a couple of tips in Marketo, right? And I've done a webinar on this before around form tips and what you can do. A couple of things that really boost conversion rates on forms. The first thing is using pre-fill. So actually pre-populating the form with the relevant detail of the user. And I love this on an unsubscribe page. If only everybody would crack this. I can't believe it's still 2022 and I have to type in my email address to unsubscribe. It's irritating, but it can be fixed, right? Using pre-fill, because we know who you are. You're clicking on something we've just sent to you. or we already know who you are because we've cookied who you are. I think the second thing is progressive profiling, like building up that picture. And again, this is something we talk about in Marketo a lot, which is global forms. This is an MQL position form, or this is a further down the funnel form or an acquisition form, wherever it's going to be. They're going to have different categories and types that you're going to use in order to collect data as you go. This helps you build a quality database, answer all the questions or as many questions as you can before it even gets to a salesperson. And of course, this piece that I love so dearly, which is known visitor forms. So again, how do you, if you already know it's me coming back to your website, it's not that creepy anymore that you know who I am. I mean, the reality is it looks a bit weird initially, but we can actually stop the forms from even existing by saying, hey, James, I know you're back again. Click this button to do what you want to do, which is why you've clicked through in the email in the first place. So I think these are really, easy tips that you guys can deploy in Marketo in order to improve conversion rates across all your forms, right? And there's some tricks to make them work, of course, on non-Marketo pages. But hey, if you want to talk about that, throw it in the Q&A, or we can catch up after this and have a conversation on that as well. So, Arthur, tell us a little bit more about Chili Piper, because I think there'll probably be a range of people in the audience who've never heard of you guys, which is a shame.
Yeah, we're definitely coming out more and more, and you'll see us a lot more often because we have identified this as a huge opportunity. And I think those tips that you just went through, James, were fantastic. Ultimately, it's just about reducing the friction that it takes for somebody that's interested in speaking with your sales team about buying your product or service, and actually making that happen and answering their questions, getting them pricing and all of that. So this is what we often recommend in terms of optimizing your form. So really making it as easy as possible for them to give the relevant information and actually get into a buying conversation. So the first one, we want to keep our form fields to a minimum, and how we are able to do that, because you still want to ask for certain types of information, make sure we're routing them properly, make sure they're qualified, using lead enrichment. So something like a Clearbit or a Zoom Info can help a ton. I know a lot of companies, Gong comes to mind, where they had 7 form fields and they managed to reduce it to 1 just by asking for the email. And then on the back end, Clearbit is doing their lead enrichment. So giving the demographic data, firmographic, all of that, so they can actually qualify in real time. The second one, this is where we tend to specialize a lot, is to add a booking option to your forms. So the moment of highest intent, they're going through, they're filling out their form. Why not capture them right then and there and give them a time and a place to know, hey, when I book it in here, I'm going to know I'm going to speak with a sales rep of this company. I don't have to worry about it. And oftentimes we reference a stat that 50% of the time, the vendor that gets in touch with the prospect first wins the deal. That a lot of the time the prospect might know they're buying the best product or service, but ultimately it's like, who can get me through the sales process the quickest at a fair and decent price that solves my problem? That right there is your competitive advantage. So those two are very key to get people into the form. And I think the last one is to get people to really start thinking about the benefits of, hey, what happens if you do decide to fill out this form and check out a demo or speak with somebody from sales? So I wanted to talk a little bit about our A/B test that we did here. So what you're seeing in front of you is the changes that we made in order to see a 55% increase on form conversions. So one of the first things we did here, if you see those customer wins, we actually had them below the fold before, which required whoever was filling out or landing on this page to scroll down to see those customers' wins. So we actually put them above the fold, no scrolling, they can see right then and there. And also bolded those important stats. So it was very easily readable. They could see right away, oh, okay, wow, 294% increase in inbound source revenue. That sounds pretty good. So we really made sure to highlight that. The qualify route book prospects in minutes crossed out in seconds, we had shortened that. So it was almost maybe twice as long. So we tried to shorten that. let them know it's going to be down from minutes to seconds. And then this one's a shout out to Amazon. So we experimented with eliminating that navigational bar. So once they landed on this page, we knew we wanted them to request a demo. We made it somewhat difficult for them to kind of go back in time or see what next steps were. We just wanted them to focus completely on filling this out and getting to the next step in terms of picking a time. So all of that included, it was an A/B test that we ran, and we saw 55% increase in conversion. So we have now implemented a lot of these tips across most of our landing pages, and we do continue to see an increase in conversion here as well.
It's pretty impressive. I'm going to steal a few of those tips for our new website that's going live shortly. So we're back onto the web agency tonight. We've got to get some of these 55% conversion rate improvements in place by tomorrow, please. That's really impressive. And I think, again, a lot of this comes back to the process that you take these people through, right? And the journey that you take them through. And, I spotted that Jen had put a question in the chat saying, is there a golden number of fields that people are using? And 3, actually, when you look at most of the research surrounding conversion rate optimization, is the sweet spot, right? Which is pretty cool. And I think the other thing when we start thinking about this is we go through that journey, right? So filling out the form is the first piece. If you then get this silence after I filled out a form and I want to inquire, then that's often where we start to lose people. I'm going to hand over to you, Arthur, just to give us some quick insights into Chili Piper, because again, we're talking about all this stuff in theory. It's going to be great to have a look at some of that information.
Apologies if AppFolio is in the crowd. We wanted to pick somebody from some of the attendees here that we thought there was an opportunity to potentially increase those inbound conversions. So what I love here, book a demo, free demo above the fold. Even before I scroll down, very easy to see what they would want me to do ultimately if I land on their page. So they have something here. Let's analyze their book a demo. So 6 form fields, not too bad. Obviously, we had talked about 3 is kind of the sweet spot here, but I think a lot of the stuff they're asking for is okay. Phone number, I know people might be hesitant to add that in. A lot of people type in fake phone numbers. But they might know their market better than what I do, which they for sure do. And maybe phone numbers is actually something that they've noticed. People are willing to speak over the phone in terms of property management and real estate management. Here's where I'm guessing total units managed in a portfolio. So it's not a drop down. I have to add something like 11. And my bet is that is how they have their sales team set up, maybe in terms of an SMB, mid-market enterprise, where SMB handles something like 1 to 5 units, and then anything, I don't know what their cutoff is, 50 units plus would be enterprise. So that, I'm guessing, is how they have it going. They have a little bit of a social proof here, which I like to see. I would have liked to see maybe some, a little bit more social proof, and then they kind of have a random portfolio, I guess, a screenshot of there. So not really sure what that does, but why don't we go ahead and fill this out? And then for those watching, again, AppFolio, if you're on here, please ignore this. I'm just going to see where this takes me and say, book a demo. Perfect. So this is very status quo of what we're seeing today, right? I fill out the form, give them all the information they need. One of our experts will be in touch with you shortly to set up an AppFolio property manager demo. I mean, the reason I filled this out is to get that demo. So why don't we really cut that in between? And instead of waiting for the marketing system to route me and create me as a lead in the CRM, disperse that to the right rep for them, then to reach out and say, hey, thanks, saw you're interested. We can actually bypass all of those steps and make it very easy to get them into our funnel with something like Chili Piper. So this is our test form. We do use Clearbit to shorten this. So if we don't have any information, this is where it's going to ask you for these 6 fields, but I'm just going to go through and fill this out as I normally would. Actually, let me do this, my old company. Now, this is the difference, I think, between Chili Piper and a lot of other scheduling tools out there is we can, some you might see a calendar posted right then and there where you can actually pick your time. We decided against that because of two main reasons. One, whose calendar are we putting up? Is it James? Is it Arthur's? Maybe if we have a small sales team, we can get away with that. But as soon as we start to add a little bit more members to our sales teams, a little bit more complexity, if we have multiple products, that becomes an issue. And number two, especially for those marketers on the calls that have probably heard this from sales, how do we know if that lead is even qualified enough to book in with our sales rep's calendar? So because of that, we actually want them to fill out the form first, and then we are seeing how they fill out that form to determine, one, if it's qualified, and then two, which team to route it to. So our form of qualification is based on the CRM. Right now, Chili Piper, we can only integrate with Salesforce or HubSpot CRM. We are working to become CRM agnostic, but if you were to choose any of these other options, that's the first sign to say, hey, this lead is not qualified and we're not going to show a calendar. Let's actually take them to a different buyer journey and take them down to a different path. I know for some of these, we say, hey, sorry, we're not on Pipedrive right now, but we'll keep you in mind as soon as we have that integration available. But for now, I'll select Salesforce. And then internally, how we route is based on company size. So we have different groups of reps within each of these bands that once they select it, it would just round robin between who's next up. I know we also have some advanced functionality where if we wanted to either credit back reps or even have it a weighted distribution where, let's use James for an example. He's an incredible sales rep. I want him to receive 80% of the leads between the 251 to 1K. And poor old Arthur, he's only going to get 20% of those. So for every 5 leads, James is going to get 4 of those with his calendar showing up, and I'm only going to get 1 of those. I've also seen it flip the other way, where if you want to give maybe newer reps at bats and more experienced reps, they have their book of business, we can set it up the flip side. So I'm just going to select this here. And then once I click submit, a couple of things are going to happen here. So mentioned earlier in terms of what forms are, and they're not necessarily smart. Part of the reason I find that is often they're not connected to your internal systems, mainly your CRM. Everybody that fills out a form is going to be treated as a net new lead. A lot of the reasons why people come to Chili Piper is because of that CRM integration with Salesforce or HubSpot, where we can actually look up who that account owner is. So if James already owns this account and he's working this account, Chili Piper is smart enough to recognize that and pull up James's calendar so we continue that same journey with that same rep instead of treating it as a net new lead. If you want to take it to the next level, we actually do what we do here at Chili Piper is we want to credit the account owner, but only if they had activity on the account. So if we're seeing that activity hasn't been on the account for 60 days or more, we're going to treat this as a net new lead. But if we are seeing that the rep is working this account, it's going to recognize it and pull up their calendar. If it's a net new account or it doesn't have any ownership, what it will then do is go to that band of 251 to 1K, look at who's next up on the round robin. And then right now we're actually presenting quite a few times based on who's next up. I can just go ahead and click here and it lets me know, perfect, my meeting with Dave Eady is booked. We've sent an email with your full booking details. You can see the scheduling process is created with Chili Piper. And if they're qualified, they book a time, then you get to cheers to Leo. So we actually take them to a different thank you page, which lets us know, hey, whoever just submitted this demo was a qualified lead. We do set up a quick explainer video here and a couple other case studies. So if they did want to learn a little bit more about Chili Piper before that meeting, they have all the information they have ready here. But if we go back to Appfolio, and maybe they've already got in touch with me and they're trying to get a time on the books, but we've just eliminated a lot of that back and forth of routing the lead to the right rep. We're doing it in real time. We're pre-qualifying and we're giving them a time to book, which I think I booked within 1 to 2 days. That's another tip for those watching. If you can book, we've seen between 1 to 3 days of that request demo. That increases chances of showing up by 300%. So again, they're on your website. It's very top of mind. Let's give them a time, ideally within the next 1 to 3 days. And we can virtually guarantee that that interested prospect is going to be in your pipeline and somebody is going to speak with them. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. just to get the audience thinking a little bit, I think there's a lot of things you can A/B test, but from what we've seen across our portfolio of companies, when you look at the average meeting held rate being 40% or less across Chili Piper's portfolio of companies, we've seen that get up to 80% plus. So that is where a lot of our customers are able to claim we've doubled inbound pipeline. And I haven't seen many A/B tests that get you to doubling your inbound pipeline these days. So something to definitely think about.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. And, again, sorry, Appfolio, for picking on you. I suppose it's always nice to look at the real world scenarios, right, and understand what's happening out there in the field, and ultimately, what could it look like? What is the examples that we could start using and deploying to our web properties? Again, if you've got any questions as you're going through some of these thoughts around meeting booking, automation, routing, then feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A, whatever you prefer. And whilst you do that, there is a great resource available on our website, which is surrounding gating content, because I know that's often a challenge for marketers as well. Should I gate? Shouldn't I gate? Again, what kind of gate should I have in place? Is it an email? Should it be a different piece of data? Again, there's some tips in there on how to do that. We'll send out these slides afterwards as well, and the recording, so that you can obviously rewatch this as well. We're at time for this webinar. I want to thank you all for joining. Again, we'll be sharing the slides out. We'll be sending you the recording and a Chili Piper link to come and speak to us in more detail. But we do also have this nice QR code, which you can scan here on the screen to set up a complimentary audit and conversation with us. And we can walk you through some of those use cases that you might have and how you may deploy Chili Piper to your business. So feel free to get in touch with any questions. I know that Arthur, myself, are available to answer any questions that you've got as well on social. So feel free to look us up and send us a message, and we can speak that way. Thank you all for attending.